You are listening to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center Just Rural podcast series that highlights innovative programs and success stories from rural communities across the United States. Michelle Hall is the Director of Transitional Living at the Oasis Center in Nashville, Tennessee, an organization that provides at-risk youth a connection to caring adults, safe and secure environments, and empowerment to make better choices. During this interview, Michelle discusses how to create and maintain trusting relationships with youth and youth who identify as LGBTQ while using trauma-informed services. She also briefly discusses the ways in which she measures the success in her work.
So we focus on asking people what their gender expression is or what pronoun they want used when they're being identified, but we don't really ask about sexual orientation. That feels a little intrusive, and nobody asks me like those kind of questions when I come to work, but it is nice and respectful to say, what's your name and what pronoun would you prefer? And so that, like, just doing little things like that are huge, and that also works really well with straight youth because, one, it helps everyone know there are things that we might not have thought about before when you're in the majority, that it's good to remind yourself that there are other people with different needs or want to be called different pronouns or express themselves differently than you do, or maybe outside a box of what you have been trained to think the world looks like. So it's good to kind of break outside of that. So little things like that. We have it in all of our intake information. So even if a youth doesn't identify as GLBTQ, they're getting exposed to that language and that information, and they'll often ask, why are you asking me that? Which is perfect format to like just start talking about, because we accept all people here. And that kind of gives a good foundation also for, we don't talk mean about people, we don't make fun of people, everyone has a right to be who they are. Like, it sort of lays that foundation. So we do make sure we're doing that in all our programs. Become familiar with the issues, terminology. I think that's really helpful. And again, it's real important to be skillful in that. At the same time, you don't have to wait to do these things until you're really comfortable with it, or until you feel like you have it down perfectly. You get to mess up doing this stuff, just like you get to mess up in youth development. The kind of beauty of this work is you do it in relationship. So you say, oh, I'm so sorry. I called you the wrong pronoun, or I forgot to ask you, or I made this assumption based on this, and I think that was a bad assumption and I shouldn't make assumptions. Like, you get to say that, and actually that is it's a good thing. It models really good stuff. I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as service providers to get it right and say the right thing. And I know myself, I mess up. I had to practice, I don't know how many times, saying LGBTQ because I memorized it as GLBTQ. So I get some anxiety about, oh, I'm going to mess it up, I'm going to say the acronym wrong. But you get permission to do that. And it's not about getting it right. It's more about saying, I want to celebrate people for who they are. I want to know what I can do to support people in what they're struggling with. And when you can like focus on that, the details of it are not the things that make or break it. You're not going to get it perfect. You should strive to do it well, but you're going to mess up. You don't know their story until they tell you their story. You don't know who they're attracted to until they tell you who they're attracted to. You don't know how they experience themselves until they tell you how they experience themselves. And the same thing about their trauma. Like, you can listen to a million stories of people having experienced horrific things happening to them, but you still don't know this person's story until they tell you. So I think it's just realizing there is no cookie cutter like response or way to deal with people. You have to deal with people as an individual, this is a story that happened to this very particular person. They might have a different gender expression than you do, or than the majority of people that you've worked with, but they're still a person, very different, just like everybody you work with. So their story's unique. How they respond and react to that story is unique and different. So to me, that's where the relationship comes in, because, well, our biggest problem is when we assume we know who people are, or how they identify. Like, that's when we mess up. So just waiting for a person to tell you who they are, and that happens verbally and non-verbally. Like, their behavior also tells you who they are, but you're not going to know that unless you're in a relationship with them. So we might go up and introduce ourselves. We might tell them who we are. We might tell them what we do and invite them to come. We might offer food and a meal in the outreach center. That is very participatory. Like, we don't have volunteers who come in and just serve. We try to stay really far away from, like, soup kitchen ideas, or I have stuff and I'm going to give it to you because you're poor. Like, we try to stay away from that, but it's more community. It's more, I'm here, I'm going to be in conversation with you. If you like to cook, I'm going to invite you to cook with me. We're going to eat this together. I need to eat. I'm going to eat too. While we're going to be talking. We're going to build a rapport. Again, we do training around, like, in specific situations, we don't want to invite the person to tell a traumatic story before we're able to safely contain that. So we don't want to start a group and ask, what's the last violent thing that happened to you, when it probably happened last night, and they're kind of numb and just need to get through that day. But it might be a question, once we know them a whole lot better and we're in a different interaction, that we might say, we're really concerned about you. Are you okay? And then let them kind of tell their story at the place that they're ready to tell it. We don't want to push young people to tell their story. And we don't assume that a person is their trauma. Like, something really bad could have happened to you last night, and that's still not who you are. Something bad could have been happened to you your whole life, and you are not rape, you are not sexual abuse, you are not physical abuse. You are this person who has these gifts and these strengths and this unique way of being in the world. So usually we engage them around those. We do a lot of activities in our outreach center. We're also always asking them, what do you want to work on today? What do you want to do today? How can we help you get what you need? So we're really trying to meet them where they are and where they're ready to tell their story. In our agency, just basic things like safety, connections, relationships, participation. Like, a person has to feel empowered, I think, to participate. So we're asking about, do they feel empowered? Do they feel like they can participate? And we're measuring generosity and justice. That, I think, is something that's way under considered when we're working with young people. Is a really good indicator is how well they're connecting to other people. Our youth take care of themselves, and they often are helping other people. So for them to get acknowledged in that way is huge. But then they can also help change up some societal conditions. And I'm not saying that they would do that immediately, but their experience is important in being able to change the conditions that created their homelessness. So we are specifically checking in about that, about safety, about participation, about empowerment, and about generosity. But we're measuring the concrete things too, like, did they move off the streets? But I think if you stay focused on that, it can be discouraging, because sometimes those things take a long time to happen. Or a young person can move into safe housing, and then in a month something happened and they move out of that housing, or they lose that housing. So baby stepping, like, just really knowing that this is long-term development, and relationships are a really big indicator of success. If you can stay in a relationship through a young person in a fight with you, it's amazing. Like, I would love to systematically measure that. Like, when staff say the two young people got in a fight with each other, or they argued with me, or there was a verbal altercation, if we can say, okay, did you stay in a relationship? Were you able to stay in good standing with them through that? And then after, go back and say, hey, I know we just had disagreement, I still care about you, can we work through this? If we can measure that, to me that's like a huge success, because they don't have a lot of experience with having conflict or difficult things in relationships, will the people stay with them through that. So measuring relationship is a huge indicator of success. I don't wait for like big milestones to feel good about my job. A little connecting, a little bit of like just being able to go, my God, every day I get to come and like see these beautiful kids. And I say kids incredibly like fondly, like they're technically all adults. But to see them in the world and not just what they've overcome, but just how they still sparkle and shine, like that feels like a success to me. So I would say when you're working with someone who has experienced sexual assault, again, that's not who they are. That's something that they've experienced. Keeping that in mind, they're a whole person with a whole lot of stuff that has gone into them. This is a very painful thing that's happened, and a lot of energy and support needs to go on around them to help them heal from that. But it's not all they are. So being in a relationship with them, not just as a victim or a survivor of sexual assault, but just being in relationship with them as this whole beautiful person, I think is the thing you have to keep in mind. I have a lot of respect for people who do this work and who do it for long periods of time. You have to look at your own stuff every day when you do this stuff. You have to own your judgments around it. You have to own that sometimes it's really hard to look at these really dark, hurtful things that go on in the world. And you really have to say to yourself, where's the beauty, to be able to keep doing it. So I have a whole lot of respect for people who do this.
This project was supported by grant number 2009 TAAX K042, awarded by the Office on Violence Against Women, U.S. Department of Justice. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this publication are those of the author and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Department of Justice, Office on Violence Against Women. For more information about our rural project, visit www.nsvrc.org.